These 17 motorcycles weren't just fast, they were flat-out lethal. Banned, recalled, or whispered about in fear, they blurred the line between thrill and death wish. Some launched like rockets, others cornered like chaos, and all of them earned their place in infamy. If you've got the guts, stick around. These are the bikes that prove too dangerous for the road. Starting at number 17 is the Brauch Superior SS100. Born in the 1920s, the Brauch Superior SS100 was the first bike ever to guarantee 100 mph. This was back when riders had no helmets, no padding, just goggles, grit, and a will to flirt with death. Under the tank, the bike packed a 998cc V-twin kicking out 73 horsepower. Sounds modest now, but back then, it was absolute madness. It roared like thunder and launched like hellfire. But while the engine screamed into the future, the rest of the bike stayed stuck in the Stone Age. It had a stiff frame, brakes that barely worked, and suspension in name only. Pushing this thing to top speed felt like strapping yourself to a rocket with bicycle wheels. The SS100 didn't forgive. It didn't blink. It demanded complete control, unwavering focus, and nerves of steel. One mistake, and it bit back, hard. Even a skilled rider like T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, couldn't escape its wrath. His fatal crash on one cemented the bike's deadly reputation. It was deadly by design, and that danger only pulled riders in closer. That was vintage danger, leather goggles, and death wishes. But next, we're trading class for chaos, and the throttle doesn't ask permission. Number 16 is the Kawasaki H2 Mach 4. With a 748cc two-stroke triple engine kicking out 74 horsepower, it could hit 0 to 60 mph in under 4 seconds. That was Ferrari fast back in the early 70s, and for a bike, it was downright insane. But here's the twist. It wasn't built to handle that speed. The H2 had a flimsy frame, brakes that barely qualified as functional, and suspension better suited for a pogo stick. Twist the throttle, and the front wheel shot skyward, whether you meant it or not. And when the power band hit, it wasn't smooth, it punched. This wasn't a ride, it was a bar fight on two wheels. The chaos earned it a deadly reputation. Enhanced rider scheme was flooded with riders who underestimated it. Fatalities climbed. And soon, the H2 earned a chilling nickname that stuck, the Widowmaker. This wasn't marketing spin, it was a survival warning. You didn't tame the H2, you clung to it and hoped for the best. It was thrilling, it was wild, and for many, it was their last ride. Now picture one that throws you off mid-corner, even when you're doing everything right. Coming in 15th place is the Suzuki TL1000S. In 1997, Suzuki thought it had built a superbike slayer. The TL1000S came packing a 996cc V-twin engine that cranked out a wild 125 horsepower. That was muscle car power on two wheels. For a naked bike, this was flat out insane. It launched like a rocket and sounded like rolling thunder. The thrill quickly unraveled when it came to control. Suzuki fitted it with an experimental rotary rear damper. Sounds space age, right? In practice, it was a disaster. The damper couldn't cope with hard riding. Riders reported violent rear-end wobbles, and worse, sudden vicious tank slappers that could toss you off mid-ride like a bull gone mad. Things got so sketchy, Suzuki issued a factory recall. Suzuki tried a few fixes, including adding a steering damper, but by then, the damage was done. The TL1000S had already earned its bad boy reputation. Today, it lives on as a cautionary legend. Riders still whisper about it like folklore, a bike with brutal power, little finesse, and zero forgiveness. It was fast, it was loud, and it was just waiting to bite. Suzuki reached for performance glory and accidentally built a landmine on wheels. But what if the chaos came with 8 cylinders of Italian lunacy? Next, we enter a time when speed outpaced sanity and logic didn't even show up. At number 14, we have the Moto Guzzi V8. The 1955 Moto Guzzi V8, aka the Auto Cylindri, was pure, unapologetic engineering insanity. It packed a liquid-cooled 500cc V8 engine that screamed to 12,000 RPM and cranked out 78 horsepower. In an era of plodding singles and twins, this bike hit over 170 mph. It wasn't just fast, it was from another planet. Sadly, the rest of the bike had no clue how to handle that power. Tires shredded under speed. Brakes gave up mid-corner. The chassis flexed like wet cardboard. Even Moto Guzzi's factory riders wanted nothing to do with it. Too fast, too wild and dangerous. And don't even talk about maintenance. Tuning the engine was like solving a mechanical riddle in Latin. It was decades ahead of its time, and paid the price for it. The Auto Cylindri was a firework on wheels. Brilliant, short-lived, and a little terrifying. It never dominated the track, but it sure left a mark on racing history. A masterpiece of speed and madness, the V8 remains one of the boldest, most bonkers bikes ever made. That was ahead of its time, but this next bike thought it was the future. It looked like a spaceship and sounded like one. In the 13th spot is Honda CX500 Turbo. This was Honda swinging for the future and slipping hard on the throttle. The 1982 CX500 Turbo wasn't just bold, it was the first mass-produced turbocharged motorcycle. It looked like a spaceship. It sounded like progress, but riding it? That was a whole different beast. Powered by a 497cc V-twin, kicking out 82 horsepower, it didn't seem too wild, until the turbo woke up. You'd twist the throttle, nothing. Then boom, a violent surge of boost would punch the rear wheel like it owed it money. It was less power delivery and more power ambush. The brutal turbo lag hit at the worst possible moments. Mid-corner, mid-pass, mid-anything. No warning, no build-up, just full-send chaos. Add a heavy frame and soft suspension, and you had a bike that felt more like a runaway freight train than a precision machine. Cornering was sloppy. Control? Questionable. And confidence? Gone. It wasn't carving roads, it was fighting them. Honda usually nails it, but with the CX500 Turbo, they built something that looked like tomorrow and handled like a booby trap. It delivered the thrill, all right, but miscalculate, and you'd be catapulted like bad science fiction. Turbo lag just tried to kill you. Now brace yourself. For a bike that seduces with style and punishes you for believing it. Lock in your ride, hit like, tap subscribe, and hang on. The road ahead only gets meaner. Let's dive back in. Number 12 is the HarleyDavidson VRod. With a 1,131cc liquid-cooled V-twin co-developed by Porsche, the VRod wasn't just loud, it was loud and lethal. It cranked out over 115 horsepower and revved high like a sport bike, not your grandpa's Harley. Then came the curveball, cruiser styling with sport bike speed. Long, low, and heavy. That setup was great for looking cool at a red light, but disastrous when the road got twisty. It didn't turn so much as hesitate, then lurch. At low speeds, it felt like muscling a steel boulder. At high speeds, it got twitchy, unstable, and downright scary. Many riders, lured in by the Harley badge, expected a chill ride. What they got was a muscle-bound brute with attitude, and no patience for rookies. It scraped hard in corners, fought you in traffic, and punished anyone who underestimated it. The VRod was fast, flashy, and totally unfiltered. It didn't play by cruiser rules, it rewrote them with a snarl. Treat it like a laid-back Harley, and you'd be lucky to walk away with just bruised pride. After a 16-year run, Harley killed it off in 2017. Some called it evolution. Others called it mercy. Next we're going full feral. Two-stroke fury, one bad attitude, and no mercy for mistakes. Number 11 is the Kawasaki H1 Mach 2. Before the infamous Widowmaker earned its grim nickname, there was the 1969 Kawasaki H1 Mach 2, a two-stroke lunatic that gave riders their first real taste of raw, unfiltered speed. Its 499cc triple-cylinder engine spat out 60 horsepower, which doesn't sound wild, until you realize the rest of the bike was barely holding it together. It was light, it was fast, and it was downright volatile. The frame flexed like spaghetti under stress. The suspension? Soft and vague. And the brakes? Let's just say they preferred suggesting a stop rather than enforcing one. Twist the throttle too hard, and you were either lighting up the rear tire or airborne, sometimes both. The H1 had a nasty habit of spitting riders off without warning. High sides were common, corners were sketchy, and even a straight-line blast could end in disaster. It marked the birth of Kawasaki's speed first, safety later era. The engine howled with fury, while the chassis begged for mercy. It wasn't just fast for its time, it was a grenade on wheels. Riding one was electric, dangerous, and absolutely unforgettable if you managed to hang on. Coming up is a sleeper, calm on the outside, detonation mode inside. One flick of the throttle, and it explodes. Taking the 10th position is the Yamaha VMax with VBoost. The 1985 Yamaha VMax was a wolf in cruiser's clothing, calm on the outside, chaos under the tank. At first glance, it looked like a relaxed highway cruiser. But twist that throttle, and suddenly you were riding a street-legal drag missile with a serious temper. Underneath was a 1,197cc V4 engine armed with Yamaha's insane VBoost system. Once that kicked in, you weren't accelerating, you were detonating. The power surge slammed through the bike like a rocket booster, launching 145 horsepower straight into your spine. And here's the catch. The frame, suspension, and brakes weren't ready for that kind of fury. The chassis flexed like a pretzel, the suspension squirmed under load, and stopping power was more hope than confidence. Riding it hard felt like trying to tame a muscle car with bicycle brakes. To its credit, modern VMAXs are a different beast, refined, stable, and brutally fast. But the original? It was unpredictable, wild, and totally unhinged. A cult icon born from power overload, it demanded serious respect and punished anyone who took it lightly. The VMax slapped you awake. Now meet a bike that didn't just go fast, it fell apart while doing it. Number 9 is the Suzuki GSXR1100. In the late 80s, the Suzuki GSXR1100 was the king of straight-line savagery. Armed with a monstrous 1,127cc inline-4 engine pushing out 145 horsepower, it could rocket past 175 mph without flinching. A missile on 2 wheels, but with zero guidance. And that was the problem. The chassis just wasn't up to the task. Under serious speed, the frame flexed and the suspension couldn't hold the line. Push it too hard and the whole thing wobbled violently. Riders quickly dubbed it the tank slapper from hell. And when it let loose, you weren't correcting. It was already too late. There were no electronic safety nets either, no ABS, no traction control, no ride modes. Just pure, old-school horsepower and whatever instincts you could bring to the fight. The GSXR1100 looked like it meant business, and it absolutely did, but it played dirty. Fast, furious, and totally unforgiving, it punished hesitation and destroyed ego. Ride it right, and you were a legend. Get it wrong, and you were a memory. You just rode a rocket with rubber bones. Now try keeping control in the dirt, where the next bike hits like a landmine, not a power band. In 8th place is the Suzuki TM400 Cyclone. The 1971 Suzuki TM400 Cyclone was less a motocross bike and more a dirt-flinging wild animal with no leash. On paper, it sounded like a racer's dream. Lightweight chassis, 396cc 2-stroke single, and a snarling 40 horsepower. But in the real world, it was a high-speed game of Russian roulette. The problem wasn't the power, it was how that power hit. There was no gradual buildup, no forgiveness. One moment you were cruising, the next you were clinging on for dear life as the engine snapped to life like a landmine under your throttle hand. The lightweight frame flexed under pressure. The suspension, barely adequate for a bicycle, let alone a rocket on knobby tires. It kicked, bounced, and bucked like a rodeo bull, punishing any rider who dared push it. Crashes were common. Injuries? Even more. Pro and amateur riders alike found themselves tossed like rag dolls, often without warning and always with consequences. The TM400 wasn't a bike you tamed, it was one you survived. A brutal, unforgiving machine that earned a fearsome reputation not through hype, but through scars. That was wild and dirty. This next one? Precision-engineered carbon-wrapped rage, built with F1 DNA and a temper to match. Number 7 is the MV Augusta F4 LH44. Blistering fast, razor sharp, and bred from F1 royalty, the 2018 MV Augusta F4 LH44 wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a carbon-clad missile with Lewis Hamilton's signature etched into its DNA. Only 44 units were built, making it as rare as it was ruthless. Co-developed with the Formula One champ himself, this Italian masterpiece packed a 998cc inline-4 engine, pushing a savage 212 horsepower. It didn't purr, it howled. Crack the throttle, and it delivered power like a sledgehammer. Hesitate for even a second, and you'd find yourself wrestling to stay upright. This wasn't a ride, it was a test. A bike built for speed, allergic to traffic, and infamously prone to overheating if not fed enough airflow. The F4 LH44 had no patience for slow. It thrived in wide-open throttle and punished hesitation. Dripping in carbon fiber and red accents, it was exotic, exclusive, and deadly if underestimated. Every inch screamed performance, but beneath the beauty was a brutal streak. Sloppy riders got humbled, fast ones got tested. That was beauty with bite. But the next ride doesn't just bite, it breaks sound. No lights, no plate, just pure weaponized velocity. Number 6 is the Kawasaki Ninja H2R. This isn't the every Ninja you think you know in the Kawasaki family. The H2R is not some commuter-friendly sport bike. It's a high-velocity weapon engineered for racetracks and reserved for the bold. With a 998cc supercharged inline-4 engine pumping out 310 horsepower, the H2R is a mechanical scream against physics. It's not street legal, not banned, but simply too extreme for public roads. No headlights, no mirrors, no plate, just raw speed and zero compromise. It blitzes past 240 mph, a number backed by data, not myth. At that speed, there's no margin for error. No electronic safety net will save you if things go sideways. Even pro riders approach it with reverence and a healthy dose of fear. Carbon fiber winglets try to glue it to the asphalt. A trellis frame battles the forces threatening to rip it apart. But taming it? That's on you. The H2R doesn't coddle or forgive. It punishes hesitation and rewards only surgical precision. It's not dangerous because it's flawed. It's dangerous because it's perfect at what it does. Twist the throttle, and you're not riding a bike. You're unleashing controlled chaos in its purest form. Number 5 is the Vincent Black Shadow. With a 998cc V-twin producing 55 horsepower, the Vincent Black Shadow could hit over 125 mph at a time when most cars struggled to reach 70. In the 1950s, that wasn't just fast, it was borderline insane. But here's the twist. While it delivered blistering speed, it wasn't built to tame it. The bike came with drum brakes, a flex-prone chassis, and rudimentary suspension. At top speed, it didn't hug the road, it danced across it. Even seasoned riders approached it with caution. British police issued them to officers, but many crashed during off-duty rides. It had power, yes, but zero margin for error. The Black Shadow was a mechanical icon, gorgeous, growling, and decades ahead of its time. But with speed that far exceeded its handling, it was a high-velocity gamble. Ride it wrong, and it didn't just bite, it devoured. In the right hands, it was magic. In the wrong ones, a fast track to disaster. Old-school power just left its mark. But up next, an American Frankenstein, built in a barn, driven by rage, and rattling like a ticking time bomb. Number 4 is the Bule RS1200. Imagine stuffing a big Harley V-twin engine into a sport bike frame. That was the idea behind the Bule RS1200, a bold move that came with serious consequences. On paper, it sounded brilliant. Torque, heavy power with sleek, aggressive styling. But in reality, it was a twitchy, unpredictable beast. The short wheelbase made high-speed runs feel like tightrope acts. And that under-damped rear suspension? It turned the bike into a pogo stick on rough roads. bouncing, rebounding, and rattling nerves. The RS1200 vibrated like a jackhammer and punished riders with a harsh, jarring ride. Add in dodgy brakes and a clunky transmission, and it demanded constant attention just to stay upright. Then came the final blow. When Harley-Davidson pulled the plug on Bule, parts dried up and support vanished. If you broke something, you weren't just out of luck, you were out of service. The RS1200 was raw, rowdy, and rebellious, but ultimately, it was a beautiful disaster. Bold, fast, and nearly impossible to tame. Next, we've got a new age brute wearing a friendly face. Looks chill, rides like a jawbreaker with handlebars. At number 3, we have the Harley-Davidson Sportster S. Don't be fooled by its clean, modern silhouette. The Harley-Davidson Sportster S isn't the approachable cruiser it appears to be. Beneath the stylish shell sits a 1,252cc Revolution Max engine cranking out a wild 121 horsepower. It's less laid-back cruiser, more bare-knuckle brawler. Push it past 130 mph, and things can get sketchy. Fast. The short wheelbase and firm suspension setup turn high-speed riding into a nerve-wracking dance. One bump, one misstep, and the bike doesn't respond. It reacts. Hard. Now here's the catch. For a machine with this kind of muscle, the braking system feels like it's still catching up. Bringing it to a halt from full throttle demands foresight, force, and maybe a quick prayer. It's an overpowered bullet with undersized anchors. What really adds to the risk? The design. It looks user-friendly, almost inviting, drawing in newer riders. But crack the throttle, and the illusion fades. This bike doesn't whisper, it roars, and it expects you to keep up. That was deceptive. But what's next is pure excess. More engine than common sense, and more horsepower than your garage can handle. Number 2 is the Boss Haas V8. This beast shoves a Chevy V8, yes, an actual car engine, between two wheels. Depending on the model, you're dealing with a 5.7L to 8.2L engine, pumping out over 450 horsepower. That's more muscle than a Corvette strapped to a motorcycle. Weighing in at a staggering 1,100 plus pounds, nearly twice the heft of your average sport bike, it still rockets from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. That's not just fast, it's violent. But here's the catch. It doesn't turn, it doesn't stop well, and it sure as hell doesn't forgive mistakes. Dual front discs try their best, but let's be honest. This beast needs runway clearance, not a brake tap. Low-speed maneuvering feels like wrestling a vending machine. At high speeds, you're not in control. You're just along for the ride, white-knuckled and grinning or screaming. It looks like madness and sounds like war. No traction control, no ABS, no rider aids. Just you, your nerve, and a ticking horsepower time bomb. The Boss Haas isn't deadly because it's flawed. It's deadly because it's excessive. One wrong move, one heavy wrist, and it stops being a motorcycle and starts being your final ride. Finally, number 1 is the Kawasaki GPZ750 Turbo. This wasn't just Kawasaki turning up the heat, it was them lighting the whole garage on fire. The GPZ750 Turbo, launched in the mid-80s, promised futuristic speed with its turbocharged engine. And sure, when the boost hit, it flew. The problem? You never knew when that would happen. Turbo lag was the villain here. You'd twist the throttle and get nothing. Then suddenly, wham! An explosion of power mid-corner that could send you into orbit. It was like riding a time bomb on 2 wheels. Cold starts were a nightmare. The bike would stumble, cough, and beg for warmth before waking up. And once it did, you better be ready. Cornering felt like a gamble. Predictability? Non-existent. Even insurance companies got spooked and started blacklisting turbo bikes. Only produced for 2 years, the GPZ750 Turbo left behind a legacy of speed, shock, and broken egos. It was a glimpse of the future, one most riders weren't ready for. These 17 machines weren't just fast, they were feral, flawed, and unforgiving. Riding them took guts, luck, and sometimes a hospital visit. But not all bikes are built to kill. For a safer thrill, check out the 15 best-selling motorcycles of 2025. Speed meets sanity.